So this is about hope and how sometimes it's not clear. So a little bit about my parents. For their honeymoon, they went whitewater canoeing. As a child, I remember them coming home from a trip with half the canoe in the car and half the canoe on top of the car. And they were smiling ear to ear. And hope was so integral in all they did, all they planned, all they dreamed. It was part of their DNA. One of my favorite memories was being caught in a squall in Lake Michigan. Dad trimmed the sails and headed to shore. But on the way, each one of us wearing a life jacket safely reached the front stay, clipped on, put our legs on either side of that stay, hung over the bow, and then rode that front wave. Every time your boat went under the wave, we went under the wave with it. When the wave came up and the boat cleared, we cleared also. It was like you were riding a whale. And so that was kind of the life philosophy. Let's be practical and head to shore, but why not make the best of it and have an adventure along the way? They learned to windsurf at age 60 and picked where they wanted to retire based on the access to water and a good sailing wind. They ended up in North Carolina, nowhere near their children. The adventures did not stop when they retired, they just seemed to multiply. It was kind of flipped. When I was a child, the newscaster would come on and say, "It's 9 o'clock. Do you know where your children are?" For us, it became, "It's November. Do we know where our parents are?" And they were never in Florida. It was the Amazon or New Zealand or flying a bush plane to Canada so they could canoe towards the Arctic Circle. While both were adventurers, it was my father who planned these adventures. My father was an engineer and everything was planned, notated, and prepared. There was plan A, B, C. He could also build, engineer, and solve just about anything, and he would devour information and science. There was always a project going on. But even with caregivers and medical care, when you have a man like my father and his world becomes increasingly limited, he will become more of a tiger, like a smaller and smaller cage. In his last months, his ability to grasp the days of the week and what was happening around him became a struggle. His mobility and energy was limited, and he became angry. There was open conversation in our family about how they wanted to live their last years. In terms of health care, what measures were too much, it got to be routine for ER visits and medical care. And sometimes we might find out a week or so later that there was an ambulance trip or they were in the hospital for a couple days, but we knew that they would call us if it was really serious. I suggested my dad was stressing about the present and the future to take him back to the past. Their life was captured on film, particularly hundreds of slide trays of their adventures, of their life well lived. With this, he could take the lead. The names of people long past would come to his tongue. His anger lessened, and he seemed more connected in the moment with my mother. It was one of these frequent best days when memories shared shifted to conversation, not about health or day-to-day tasks, but about joy and laughter and friends and family. Hope was back in full color. That afternoon, he stood up and collapsed. When Mom called, she says, "Yes, it appears to be a stroke, but he was conscious and aware, and we had been here before." The next day, I called my mom, and she said, "It's been a quiet morning." I said, "Quiet how?" She said, "Dad's not really with it, not very responsive," but she was hopeful. Now, there's one thing about my dad. He was never quiet. This didn't feel right, and I told her I was coming out. This time there was no, don't need to. This time she said, "Okay." When I arrived at the hospital the following day, the doctors were waiting to meet me to help me understand he was failing. I came to understand that my mom hoped that when this time came that all of us would be able to get there and say goodbye and be together. She was wanting the doctors to keep my dad going so that my siblings could arrive. Well, even hope can overcome air and time travel. I used my computer thing, that's my dad called my phone, to have everyone be able to say goodbye via video chat, and he was aware of everyone. After that, my dad was not quiet anymore. He was restless for hours and kept trying to get out of bed. He would not be calmed or comforted. He was stressed. He had been nonverbal since his original collapse. Then clearly he said, "Help me." And there it was again, hope, our hope. With these words, we both clung to the hope that he meant, "Help me. I'm going to fight this as I've done before." The doctors told my mom his organs were failing, that to keep him going, they would have to do a feeding tube. We talked about how they could prolong his living, but not prolong his life. That being in bed, not being able to move, and with a feeding tube was my father's greatest fear. His profound wish, his hope, was that he would never live that way. That's when my dad's hope overrode my mom's hope. My father was provided the help to finally rest peacefully when he passed away in my mother's arms. It's been almost 2 years since my dad died. My mom has adjusted and is doing well and goes on adventures. For me, I'm still processing. Here's what I've got so far. 1, when you need help, find the strength to overcome physical, mental, and emotional barriers and ask for help and keep asking. Have hope. 2, when someone asks for help, clear your mind of your own thoughts and not just listen, but hear, understand, and accept what they need and what are their hopes. Today, my hope, that we all do our best when someone says, "Help me."